Here we are, everybody. Welcome to the show. Joining me is our co-host and protagonist, Dancing Dan, the Dancing Man.
Thank you.
so, so I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about the CSRs. So this is not like a formal thing, and we're probably going to drift off to talk about some other stuff at some point, since it's not my intention to have a super serious discussion. But at the same time, if anybody has feedback about stuff, by all means, stick it in the chat, and we want feedback from the folks who care, and it is very valuable and appreciated. And I feel like the reception of the award ceremony and the announcement went over pretty well. I'd sure like to know what everybody thought about doing it on Christmas Day, although it's never going to be our intention to do it this late in the year again. So I have there's a plan and schedule in place that will result in the announcements happening significantly earlier moving forward into the future, and we'll see how
No,
that
it was
turns
kind. It
out.
was kind of. It was kind of fun Christmas Day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was sick of seeing the family at that point, so I was
There
happy
you
to hide in the
go.
basement and watch the show. So so yeah, we're gonna have to get Dan a gorilla suit for next year, of course.
Hey,
So
man.
with our
Yeah,
vast
I'm out of the hotel. It was 3 days.
hotel.
Uh,
Well, did I not hear about this? You were quarantined in a hotel?
no, we had no electricity for 3 days, man.
Oh, that sucked.
I kept telling myself, "There's people that have it worse. There's people that have it worse. There's people that have it worse."
Yeah.
It didn't work.
So, I had mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, it's really just kind of the way the schedule worked out. And if we were going to do it, because this was the week, right? So if we were going to do it this week, we might as well do it on Christmas Day. And by 8 o'clock, right, most people's festivities are starting to wind down, I think. So people want to get out and go to the movies. That's why those are open. The bars are all open at that hour. So let's give people something wholesome to do in that hour instead of going out and doing some foolishness,
You see, Bill
right?
says it's a fail on Christmas Day, and Alan, right under it, says he liked having the distraction.
I did too, but we gotta recognize not everybody's got the same family dynamic as we do, right? We do most of we got the two families. My family pretty much does everything on Christmas Eve. My wife's family, we do everything on Christmas Day, and we had them all over here, right? But like the three or four of them were hanging around at like 9 p.m. I was like, oh, I'm happy to hide in the basement now.
Oh,
So
it,
results are in fact up on the CSR website. There
yeah.
isn't a post there. I'll put the link in the chat here, but there isn't a post for it, which I just didn't get done because of timing. And there really should be, but there the tab across the top that says 2021 CSR award winners does in fact contain the winners. So sorry for any confusion on that. I will put this in the chat. And in fact, I have pointed people that. So this is a thing that Doug, you got to respect the folks that people don't necessarily want to watch the show to figure out who won,
Yeah.
right? I did put it on Board Game Geek as well for what it's worth. So I won't say that we got the news out to absolutely every channel. For example, we didn't get to Consim World, which is just an oversight, really. But that's why we're going to have a little better organization next year. So yes, this is exactly it. Watch Chinese food. We our family at one point did that. We did everything on Christmas Eve and went out to Chinese restaurant on Christmas Day.
I'm,
And
I'm gonna
not
I'm
Jewish,
gonna
so.
adopt that. I'm gonna do that.
It's by that time you're kind of ready to be done with it. You know what I mean? You've been pounding stuff for a week and wrapping presents and shopping and putting decorations up and all this stuff, particularly if you're having people over. So I completely sympathize with folks who were just ready to be done with the holiday after that,
Yeah.
right? So but yeah, so I mean, if folks watched it the following day, and it looks like the numbers are pretty good, right, Dan?
Yeah, I think they're what? We're close to 1,000 people, man.
It's probably over 1,000 at this point. It was like 970 when I looked earlier
Oh
today,
yeah,
several hours.
that's just fantastic, man. It's you know what it feels like it's back on track. It's like the good old days. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, this is the 2023 is really going to kind of be the back on track thing, I think. But
Yeah.
the BGG search for like posts and stuff like that, I think is not great. If you're searching for the name of a game, it's okay, or a designer or something like that. It's in the Wargaming press releases forum, if that helps. But we should have had a news post. The problem is that WordPress has done a lot of stuff since I was an aggressive WordPress user, and I don't know how the fucking thing works. So that's basically what it boils down to. Oh yeah, if you had to fly Southwest, you were hosed. So
Why? What happened?
I'm not even sure Civilization is a strategy game at this point. I have a low regard for the Civilization games at this point, even though I played the crap out of Civ 2 when it was around. So 2 CSR awards shows HUN 644. One of these may have been the announcement of the nominees from a month or so ago. But the one from Sunday was the actual winner announcements.
The nominees. I didn't do a show on the nominees.
Yeah, you did.
What?
It was in your regular show, but
Oh.
remember I gave you the list of nominees?
Oh yeah.
There you go. There you go. So did we have a technical hiccup in the middle of it, or was that on your side? I assume
that was on my side. I must have deleted something, and you have to delete it twice from my program. So
what program
on
do you
my
use
side that.
for video editing? Because I'm curious.
But we didn't miss anything, did we?
Well, Jeff Beeler seems to feel like we missed science fiction and best magazine board war game. Best science fiction and fantasy board war game was won by Oath, the Cole Worley game. If you haven't seen it,
that's right.
Best magazine board war game was won by Hanut 1940 from World at War magazine.
I'm sorry.
Best war game magazine was won by C3I again.
That was I didn't see Oath when I was watching it. So
and for some reason, and there was like no adjustments or anything we had to make. For some reason, the text got garbled on some of the announcements for science fiction and fantasy war games too, and I had to fix that later. And I'm not sure why.
Yeah, that's on me. That was my mistake. My mistake. That was a software glitch.
I was blaming YouTube, so you just ratted out.
Yeah, yourself, I know, but it didn't make sense. I mean, YouTube. Why would he blame YouTube?
I can blame YouTube whenever I want.
I know you wanted to be the nice guy, but you know what I mean. You gotta take it where it hurts.
Yeah, this was clearly an error of some kind, and I was thinking it was like a YouTube reception thing, and I was fooling with trying to see if YouTube was having traffic problems. But by the time I got close to that, it was back on. So
yeah, no, that's my software.
Okay, we're blaming Southwest Airlines for that snafu. So
if anybody wants to buy me a really top-notch software, forget it. I don't want a learning curve, so forget it.
I mean, I guess this is true, right? But the Total War games, I played quite a lot of those back in the day as well, and I'm not really motivated to do that. I don't really think that the control system on their tactical model, I think, is very primitive and unnecessarily opaque. And it's the tactical mode that is the heart of the game, right? If you just let the computer resolve the battles, you're losing like 3/4 of the game. So we did see a lot of I think we had a kind of a mix of results in that we had a couple games that did really well and won multiple awards. But we also had a good spread across all the categories of different games winning that. And I've only got some of these cards right now. Different games winning. So, for example, right, we had, a game from Compass, a game from Decision, a game from Worthington, a game from Hollandspiel, and a game from LPS, or Against the Odds, or however we're calling them. And Rome Inc. from Against the Odds won, right? Um, that's not working, right? Best early gunpowder, GMT came in and won, but you notice they had two nominees here. Samurai Battles was nominated as well. Lepanto is by AC's Edizione. They're a Italian publisher. I assume they're an Italian publisher. Actually, the name sounds Italian. It actually looks like a pretty interesting game. And Granada from Compass is a pretty interesting game as well. This was a very interesting category as well. At two magazine games, the War of the Triple Alliance from NAC or NAC War Games or whatever they're called. Boy, that's getting some real positive buzz, by the way. Not to take anything away from Red Flag over Paris, which of course won. But War of the Triple Alliance has some really good solid buzz around it. And then of course the Napoleonic winner, right? But we had the nominee for Marshall Enterprises, which is boutique as boutique publishers get, right? Plus one from Legion, one from Vivictus, and another one from Compass. So I feel like lots of publishers should be pleased by the number of nominations that they got. All the major publishers won an award. I guess if we're calling, four publishers major publishers: GMT, MMP, Compass, and Decision, which I think you could make a case for, but I could certainly think you could make a case otherwise too. All four of those came away with awards, but we had a good spread across a lot of different, even among the winners, right? Across a lot of different publishers and a lot of different styles of game, which I think is good. Now, I guess, yeah.
Can you look at Alan Salazar's question? That would be interesting if you could.
So if by pain points we mean like points that cause, let's say, robust discussion behind the scenes of I guess let me start by saying that the categories for the 2021 awards were decided upon by whatever process they were decided upon. And that process is something that neither I nor anybody else who has provided wisdom to me had any insight into whatsoever. Now, they were what they were, and based on where the process was in the first week of October or whenever that was, it was not so changing them was not something we felt we could do. So we made some very minor language tweaks to the category descriptions just to kind of make it a little bit clearer what the award was for. On the other hand, moving forward, so the categories that we had were the categories that we saw in this year's awards, right? The 2021 awards. Next year, there will be different categories. There'll be a lot of the same categories, but there will be some differences too. There will be changes to the categories. I'm glad to say that everybody was once we kind of sat down and rationalized it, and there was some feedback, and a couple of adjustments were made based on that feedback. I'm happy to say that there was like no particular stress about the category changes that we'll be rolling out next year. On the one hand, it's been pointed out that there's too many categories, and I have some sympathy for that, right? I mean, that is something that I've been saying, but part of the reason that that's a problem is because the execution had issues, right? And if the execution's good, then having categories, well, there's still going to be a higher than practical number that you could do. Having a bunch of categories is not a bad thing in and of itself, right? And in particular, the categories by period, like Best Napoleonics, Best American Civil War, and all that stuff, that's got a long history with the Charlies. The Charlie Awards are the only war game awards that touch war games that do that. And so while there's some minor tweaks to that next year, 90% of those period or thematic categories will be the same with maybe slightly modified definitions. And then there's like what I'll call the technical categories, which are things like best map and that kind of stuff. And those will be changing more radically next year. So Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. Welcome, Mo.
Hey,
Thanks for
Mo.
coming by. So we're catching up on the chat here at this point. A lot of folks have. So the interesting thing to me about Atlantic Chase. So this is an issue that was pointed out, right? Atlantic Chase is a 2-player game that has a solitaire mode to it. And in fact, there's a whole book of solitaire scenarios for Atlantic Chase. One of the questions that needs to be addressed is this eligible for this category? And that was not contemplated before, right? There will be a mechanism to ask those kind of questions moving forward. Because
That's
think
good.
about it, almost every war game published by a major publisher now has some kind of solitaire mechanism. There are certainly exceptions. Pacific War doesn't, for example. But like GMT's got like a whole team, Jason Carr's GMT1 group, literally working on bots and other solitaire mechanisms for as many GMT releases as they can. Bill over at Compass has talked about this. It's like he always pushes for some kind of solitaire mechanism in the game wherever possible. Sometimes it might not be practical, but again, so where do you draw that line, right?
Now, does
A
that
solitaire
deserve,
game versus like the 80% now of big ticket games.
and does that deserve a new category in itself?
No, because those games already have categories. I mean, really, I mean, if we want to say Atlantic Chase is a World War II game, and it is, well, it's a World War II game, right? It's eligible for a number of technical categories.
But it's also eligible for the solo play, man.
Well, yeah, but you could play anything solo, right?
Yeah.
But based on the definition that we had, and again, we didn't feel comfortable to change that. Based on the definition that we had, it was not disqualified from that category. So, if you see a cleaned up definition of certain categories, don't be shocked.
Yeah, look, Vince Ree has a good a 2-player game that
Well, this is what I'm saying is the pool of 2-player games or multiplayer games or whatever that have some solitaire mechanism in it is really large now, right?
Yeah,
and
but it's a 2-player game.
If it's a category in which 80% of the war games released that year qualify for, then maybe it's too broad a category and should be fine-tuned. On the other hand, when somebody, Doug, if somebody asks, what's a great solitaire war game? Are you going to consider something like Coin, right? Coin's got a solitaire mechanic.
Yeah,
right?
no.
Is that what you think of when you think of solitaire war games? I'm going to contend that it is not. The solution to this is just to have some kind of mechanism, camera focus problem, by which you can make these decisions, and we didn't really have that in place before. So we got to point out, as soon as Stigler shows up, we're gonna start talking about the win from decision games. Red Flag over Paris, I haven't had a chance to play, but it looks great, and Fred's great, and I'm happy for Fred. So congratulations, Fred, on Red Flag over Paris winning a Charlie as in addition to the Summit Award. So well, then this is a different question, though, right? Doug says if it's good single player, he'd include in the discussion. If it sucks solitaire, that it shouldn't win. Well, yeah, if it sucks, it shouldn't win. I agree. This is what we used to call vacuously true back in discrete math.
Yeah, I agree with Mo.
Well, and again, we just the category definitions maybe need a little bit of fine tuning. I could see, and I'm not proposing this. You won't see it in 2023, but I could see a category, like an award category that isn't necessarily a Charles S. Roberts Award, but maybe somebody will do this for like best solitaire mechanic, right? To specifically say, okay, Gandhi had a really cool new novel solitaire system. Let's give it an award. Let's have a category for that. I think there's enough of that in play in the pool of games that are getting released that I think somebody could realistically do that. Harold Buchanan, get on that. Make that happen. Best. Well, they're not always bots, though, right? I mean, they're kind of not always bots, but they kind of always are, right? I mean, is B7T Queen of the Skies, is that a bot that you're playing against? I think most people would say no, but it algorithmically works exactly like that. So I don't know that it's particularly distinctive.
See, Stuka Joe says best solitaire gameplay, but then Andrew says best new mechanic.
Best new mechanism wouldn't be related to wouldn't be limited to solitaire stuff. That's an interesting idea, actually.
Yeah.
Very interesting idea. And again, I'm not necessarily advocating that or saying, oh, we're going to do that. The categories for 2020, the 2022 awards, which we will be doing in 2023, are already set. We expect to make adjustments later on for the following year too, until we have reached a happy equilibrium. Strongest cardboard box.
Yes, of course. Yes.
This is true. A lot of people do play war games solo, right? We should say maybe there could be a category for best solitaire gameplay from a war game that isn't a solitaire game. That might be an interesting thing for somebody to do. So yes, the about 20 minutes left on print number 3 on the 3D printer. We'll see how.
Oh, you bought a 3D printer, man?
No, my wife bought me a 3D printer for Christmas.
So, like, is it fun?
Well, I put it together yesterday and started printing today. And the little test print, there's a little cat. It's about this tall. Took about 3 or 4 hours, I think. So you kind of got to bear in mind how long it's going to take. So to some extent, it's walk away and maybe check on it every once in a while. But I will be starting print number 4 tonight, and it's after the show, and it's going to probably be another gizmo for the actual printer, actually. So,
did it, when you opened the box, did it come with enough plastic so you can print?
I am still using the I don't know 100 grams of plastic that came with the printer.
Yeah. Okay.
But they bought me a couple rolls of filament too. One of which is a PETG, which is let's say a more advanced level filament than where I'm at right now. So, but of course I wanted one to make like war game stuff, right? To make counter trays and little trays to move around the table and dice towers and all that stuff. So,
Jesus, a dice tower would probably take you a week.
You're printing in pieces. I mean, not necessarily. I just started fooling today with actually doing my own design as opposed to printing out somebody else's thing. And there's definitely like some optimization that you need to consider before you can before you really want to print it, at least in quantity, right? So they're not super fast. I mean, some are faster than others. The 3D printer I got, I guess I'll talk about that for a while. Thank you, Alan Salazar. Much appreciated. Cover art nominees, though. Everyone is a critic. This is another category that,
it's gotta be there. Gotta be there.
I don't. Well, we'll see. But
gotta be there.
Cover art. Here's a problem, though. Example, actually, because I think there is artistic expression, legitimate artistic expression by the box artist in all 4 of our nominees for that category this year. But last year there was at least one nominee in that category that was the cover was a picture of a tank from 1943. That's it. It said, it didn't say best cover presentation or something like that, or nicest box cover. It said best original box art, right? That was what the category was called. And I'm like, this is a picture from 1943 that came out of public domain somewhere. Are we really calling this original art? I mean, so not to necessarily say that it isn't, but that's a question that you have to ask, and there'll be a mechanism for handling that now. So, which we'll talk about. We wanted to give the awards themselves a little bit of room to breathe around the announcement. So we're going to plan to make the rules and categories announcement in about 2 weeks. So, so There's basically two kinds of printers for like, home hobbyist use. There's the filament printers, which is the big spool of filament. And there's the resin printers, which is a big jug of resin. Okay. And the resin printers are more expensive. You get better detail out of them, but everything about them is toxic. The liquid's toxic. The fumes are toxic. You got to have a fume. You can't just open a window and call it good, right? You'll fucking kill everybody. So you gotta, and the printers are somewhat more expensive, and frankly, probably fussier. And the filament printers are fussy enough. So, somebody asked how much the printer cost. The printer I got is considered a very good entry level 3D printer. It is the Ender 3 V2, and it runs about $250 for the printer. The spools of filament normally comes in. There's a bunch of different grades and stuff like that, and you can get it cheaper. But PLA, which is like the easiest stuff to work with, so I'm sticking with that for now, because it's a very very fiddly process, right? Where you 0.1 millimeter, if a bed alignment is off, the whole print could go south. So, it's super fiddly. The filaments that I'm looking at, which is all PLA, is generally about $15 to $20 for a 1 kilogram roll. And I figured out if I printed this is where good piece design comes in, right? Like the trays that Nathan from Wise Guy History was printing, those will generally use about 150 or 250 grams of filament. So you're getting basically 4 trays for 15 or 20 bucks, right? But there's also more efficient ways to do it. So, well, it's a specific kind of resin, and I don't know enough about the technology. I'm a total noob at this, so we'll have a video on it eventually. And the first thing that you could do is, start printing gadgets to make your 3D printer better, which is totally what I'm doing. Print number 2 was like, hey, I got to solve this immediate problem of the filament popping off the holder. So that was the second thing that I printed. The third thing that I printed was like a little tool holder to hold all the little clippers and doodads that come with it. So. It really is kind of a hobby in itself, right? Over and above whatever it is that you are printing stuff for. So,
I didn't know Jim Ozarski was sarcastic like that.
Oh, just slightly. Jim did not. Of course, he was the first one to jump on. Oh, you're going to start printing miniatures now, are you? Ha 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 ha. And unfortunately, Jim did not successfully identify the one miniatures thing that I probably will end up printing, and I'm not telling until somebody figures it out. So, and yeah, there's multiple websites, but I'm on Thingiverse to kind of find stuff, and there's a decent amount of like things that are like ready to go for wargaming that you can just download. It's not as simple as just downloading it and printing it either, actually. So what you have is like a 3D model file, and then you have to slice that file using a slicer program, which I'm using Cura for this, just because it seems to be the default, which basically takes the model and cuts it into layers. And then, of course, the printer lays it down one layer at a time, and then it determines the most efficient, uses calculus or some shit to determine what's the most efficient way to do it. It'll determine whether you need supports or something like that, because otherwise you're printing in thin air. So a lot of the miniatures, the people that I've talked to all say that resin printers are better for miniatures. So yes, actually you can actually do this. Depends if they're, it depends if they're metal or not, right? If there's metal, you got to buy them. If you got the models, yeah, you could totally do this. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. You can also just find a model somewhere and decide you got to have it. And you can say there's places that will 3D print it for you and send it to you. Obviously, that won't be 20 cents a piece. if that's the case. But like, you know, like those little trays. I don't have the soft. Actually, do I? Hold on. No, I don't have the software open anymore. But those little trays, those are like 50 grams of plastic. So you could print 20 of those on a kilogram. Yeah, you put 20 of those on a kilogram of resin, right? Which means that that costs, you know, a 20th of the $15 you spend on the resin. And of course, you can get whatever color you want, right? You get whatever you want, shiny resin, you can do that. But there's also tweaks you can make to the print itself to like affect the texture, for example. So if it's hotter, it might be shinier. I think that's how it works. I have conducted 0 experiments with that so far. If you're going to do this, then what you really need is some kind of laser cutter. And I think the industry has moved beyond laser cut counters at this point. So you can you know, if the part's $5, I'm just going to buy the part. I got to tell you. You can there are metal 3D printers now, by the way. This is not like
They
that's something
are.
you can
There
just go
are.
buy it at Best Buy. Yeah, there are. You could 3D print metal and concrete now.
Yeah,
So
concrete. Yeah.
it's
But how
neat.
do you
It's
print?
neat. You know, the attraction for me is can I make counter trays out of it, right? Can I develop counter storage solutions with this technology, or wargaming parts storage solutions that are more efficient than the standard counter trays that you can just go buy, right? That have like a lot of air in them, and you gotta get them shipped and all that stuff. So you can use water to cut things. In fact, you could cut steel with a water cutter. But that's, you know, that's not a thing you got in your garage either. So I mean, this is something that you did back when I was a kid. You made your own sinkers for fishing with
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
bars of lead that you would buy. I don't know that that's a thing that happened in the kitchen, but you know,
Yeah.
um,
I did it in the kitchen.
yeah. I mean, I know a guy that has a spin caster in his basement and it does his own lead miniatures himself. So, Jeff Beeler asks, what was the most surprising Charlie Award finalist? Good question. I'd like to open that up to the folks watching. Actually, what if there was a surprise winner? What was the biggest surprise? I feel like the biggest surprise was probably Hanut or Anu, as the case may be. Have a great day. Thanks very much. Because that's you know, I know it's Goss Light, and it's in a popular magazine, so it gets relatively large exposure. But it still had an uphill battle against for best magazine game. It's up against Rome Inc., and it's up against Mediterranean Empires, and it's up against Monty's D-Day. And I have no information about World War Africa either, but that was in
Romink, was that John Prados?
Monty's D-Day was John Prados. Rome Inc. was Philip Gillet, who's British by the way, which I didn't realize. So you're probably not supposed to pronounce his name as though it were French, although I was doing that too. So
You know what? Decisive Victory, Souisson, the designer, it, it's Serge Betancourt. But
Serge is Canadian, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right?
there you go. Okay, so it is that because it's not Serge Betancourt.
Oh, I've been saying Serge Betancourt, like, you know, as though I were from Ohio or something like that.
It's Serge Betancourt.
Anu is about it's a tank battle that happens in 1940 during the German invasion of France. So that's true. They do have the cry cut, or the cricket, as my wife calls it. I don't know who is correct. I'm maintaining that I'm correct, but she's actually probably correct. And it's it's like $150 or something like that, and there's whole aisles at Michael's of stuff for that. I was more tempted by the Glowforge, which you can use to cut like MDF and other things like leather and other things like that. That's a laser cutter, but they're about as expensive as a used car. So I do not have one and won't be getting one anytime soon.
Hey, Artie, for the best modern era board war game, Thin Red Line Games had 2 nominees.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know any? Have you played any of his games?
I have not played any of those games yet. They're however, very well regarded. I mean, they're pretty groggy games, right?
Yeah.
But they're very well regarded. I guess without looking at the vote totals and trying to figure this out, right? Which I wouldn't be at liberty to do anyway. I wonder if they didn't split the Thin Red Line vote. But at the same time, NATO, The Cold War Goes Hot is a really, really, really strong game. Really strong. It's really, I mean, you got to like the theme, right? Because it's all the same theme. But it's a really strong game. It has an
How different is it than the original?
It's fairly different from the original. I've had people argue with me about this. They're like, no, it's basically the same game with a couple of tweaks. Not really. The whole combat system's different. I mean, it's pretty different. It's maybe not a ground up redesign, but it's definitely a heavily revised new version of that game. Stuka Joe's most surprising finalist was Our God Was My Shield. Great title. I got to say that. I don't know much else about the game, to be honest. I mean, I can't be, and that's a thing, right? No one person is going to be familiar with all these things. The science fiction and fantasy games, I had no clue about any of them. I had to start asking questions. So, Rome Inc. I will tell you, this is the one thing that I did cheat on because I felt like it was okay. Is when I saw certain games that got a lot of votes in the nominating process, I did go out and buy those games, and Rome Inc. was one of those games. That is the one concession that I made to cheating during this entire process.
So, Artie, is Atlantic Chase a pure solitaire game? Or
no, it is not.
So it won for.
It is a 2-player game that happens to have solitaire a decent number of solitaire scenarios.
So it won for best solitaire.
It did. And again, based on the definition of that category as it stood, it was not. I wouldn't have been comfortable disqualifying it. So. Let me point out, thank you, Old Lady Plays. Thanks for coming by. And yes, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and all that jazz. So this is something that was pointed out actually during the voting process. A Billion Suns is, in fact, a set of miniatures rules that doesn't come with miniatures, right? There's precedent for that kind of thing getting a Charles S. Roberts Award. I'll mention that in the history of the awards. That has happened. I guess I will also say that the press release link is kicking a 404. Jim, that's probably the outdated link. Use this one. The science fiction and fantasy board game category, frankly, is going to be a category that we have to have a little bit of flexibility in, right? We're not going to have 5 Space Empire 4X games come out in a single year. We're just not, right? So, if we're going to have miniatures rules, and that's a very different landscape, right? If these awards were targeted at miniatures, we would have awards like best miniatures, best rules, that kind of thing. And we don't, and we're not. So there's nothing in the rules then or now that says miniatures games can't be nominated or win. But it does raise questions that, maybe should be at least considered. All of the, I think 2 of the 4, which ones? 2 of the 4 science fiction games, A Billion Suns and 5 Parsecs from Home, both looked actually pretty interesting to me. World of Warcraft, you know, it's a World of Warcraft board game. I'm sure it's fine. And Oath, everybody, well, I don't even know what the vote margin was on that. And again, that's another thing I wouldn't give you if I had it. But Oath won, and it's certainly I mean, all I know is I've seen the pictures, and it's a very well produced game. I could tell you that. Jim says, and Jim, who's of course played everything, says it's a board game with miniatures that does use miniature mechanics, but it's a good nominee. So, Andrew Atkin, this is a legitimate question, but if you read the current charter, you will not find the phrase board war games used anywhere. So, and again, there is precedent in the history of the Charles S. Roberts Awards for giving awards to miniatures products. Now I don't know that there's literally other awards for miniature stuff, right? So I don't feel like the Charles S. Roberts Awards really needs to service the miniatures hobby, right? So
there's already an award in itself for that.
Well, right, that's what I'm saying. In addition to the Caesar Awards that have, I think this is the third year for the Caesar Awards, something like that. So there's also nothing that says one of these science fiction or fantasy games can't be game of the year, right? There's nothing that says that, and I don't think that we need anything like that. If it's that good, let it be in the competition for it. I mean,
look, John Butterfield is just putting out the
Away Team, which has a chance it's going to get. I think there's a chance that'll be out in 2023.
Yeah, and the Pandora one, right?
Yeah, so it's called Away Team, and it's a sort of spiritual successor to the Voyage of the BSM Pandora and Wreck of the BSM Pandora that appeared in Ares magazine long ago. Mechanically, from what I can tell, they're not really all that similar, but they're, you know, John Butterfield wants to do something. I'm happy to hand John Butterfield $8 or whatever it costs.
So. It's true, man.
So McFudpucker, if you're into this, maybe check out ID Jester's channel. He does a fair amount of sports game content, which I believe does include Stratomatic stuff.
Yeah, and so does my God, what's his name? I forget.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's another guy who does a lot of Stratomatic stuff and a lot of baseball stuff.
It's not
the Nerd Workshop.
Maybe that's not who I'm thinking of, but so yeah, Stratomatic has been around forever, and they're still doing it. Long time. I mean, there's, you know, baseball, sports, video games too. That FIFA video game, people go nuts for that, for example. So. Let's see if I have anything else to say. Mediterranean Empires was well represented. I thought I believe that got nominated in a couple different categories. It did. So I mean that got 2 nominations. I think that's interesting. Up until the very last minute, we left out Trevor Benjamin as the co-designer of Undaunted Reinforcements, and that would have been an unhappy time had that not. And this was one of the last minute adjustments that I sent Dan at the last minute. After everything was done, I said, "Oh, you got to fix this." And Dan went and fixed it. So, Mo, thanks for stopping by. Much appreciated. Jim Ozarski just got his copy of Undaunted Stalingrad. So, congratulations to David for getting that out. I am kind of guessing that might get a nomination or 2 next year, but we'll see what happens. Hood Strikes North, Holden Messerschmitt. I personally will vouch for Hood Strikes North. It's excellent. It wasn't even U-Boat though. I mean, U-Boat won every category in which it was possible to even vaguely possible to be nominated, and Atlantic Chase did not. Atlantic Chase did come away with a bunch of awards, and structurally, we want to consider whether are there too many of those technical categories, for example. Now, I mean, one might say, and I would agree with you, and again, without digging up the vote, although I have no particular reservation about telling you who I voted for. I totally voted for Atlantic Chase for best rules. It's a absolutely next level in terms of rules presentation.
The guy's amazing when he writes rules.
No hesitation at all in saying that is absolutely the game that deserves best rules.
Look, if I can read his rules and learn in one reading, that's just amazing.
I've got people saying they just like wave the rule book in front of their head and they know how to play the game. It's that good. Braxis MF, I use the 2mm for Labatt. I normally use 2mm for half-inch counters.
Wait.
So at this point, it's more like a congratulations. But it is something we want to do with our vast budget. We want to have some kind of physical thing that gets sent out to the winners. Now, maybe that's just a certificate, right? But at least it's something. Whoa, Jesus. That's been happening. Yeah, this is possible. I mean, certainly we've had, novel new mechanics that don't have rule books that good. I mean, I'm looking at you. I'd love to kidnap Jeremy White and stick him in a cave and force him to write a new rule book for BCS. That'd be great. NATO is also a really strong rule book, but it's not an innovative rule book. It's just really exceptionally well done. It's a very good rule book. Best rules, Atlantic Chase, Decisive Victory, 1918, Soissons, NATO, The Cold War Goes Hot, Panzer's Last Stand, The Third Winner. I hate to say this, because I think Panzer's Last Stand is fantastic, but I don't think that is the winner of that category, okay? I think that rule book is a challenging rule book. And maybe that doesn't disqualify it by itself, but I think that game system is really not very complicated. And presentation is one of the reasons that makes it a little more challenging to approach. The Third Winner is the exact same rule book we've gotten in every OCS game for the last 10 years. So, I mean, I don't know how you don't qualify, you disqualify it for that, but it is literally the same rule book we've had in the last 4 or 5 OCS games. So,
John Longshore, I agree with you.
Maybe Panzer's Last Stand and Third Winner split the gamers vote on that category. I'm not pulling any actual numbers out. I'm just saying that maybe that is a thing that could theoretically happen. This is incorrect. There were Zero Leader was nominated for a couple awards, and its designer Chuck Seeger was nominated as the best new designer. So, and that was a very strong category too. I felt like Mark Rodriguez, Serge Betancourt. That's what we're calling him from now on. Tony Burkett and Chuck Seeger. That's a great list of nominees, I think. And that's somebody who has just released their first or second game. So all 4 of them are first-time designers, by the way. So they all have another chance at that award.
Next year is going to be some big names in the nominations, man.
Yeah, I don't think Tony's going to. Tony might have a game out in 2023, but it's not going to be from Tony Burkett.
Oh,
Tony's a friend of mine, so I not particularly have an inside track, but Tony's not exactly shy about talking about what he's working on either. He's got the next OCS games coming, and then he's got some stuff in the pipeline from Decision. Stigler, where are you? We need you here to talk about Decision. That those might be out next year. Forgotten Battles, I'm pretty sure won't be, unfortunately.
The GWG gaming with Garavaglia.
Let me get to that for a second. William Aarons asks, do winners put their award status in the publisher's catalog and on the box of the game? So at one point in the past, there were like stickers that they handed. Yeah. Remember, they used to hand these awards out at Origin. So they'd literally like go over to the publisher's booth and hand them a big stack of stickers so they could put the Charles S. Roberts Awards winner sticker on there. The awards aren't given away that way anymore. I can vouch that a number of both designers and publishers have expressed delight that they were either nominated or won awards. So, I think that the graphics are available. I'd like to get those sent out to people, but there's not going to be like physical doodads for that at this time. I can tell you that. Decision Games. I don't think Decision Games did too badly. They won an award and they were nominated for several others. So another thing that we got to rethink, and I'll be blunt and say that I think this is a problem that we're not going to solve this year, is Best Wargaming Magazine. What does that mean, right? Because what it actually is an award for Best Wargaming Magazine that has a war game in it, right? Which War Diary generally does not. And in fact, they've never published a game until like just very recently. So the players, they also expressed their great happiness that they won an award again. So
yeah, those rats.
Well, that's okay, Dan. They only won because we recused ourselves. So isn't that right?
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think I'm gonna recuse myself next year because I don't know why.
Well, you folks got to give Dan the feedback, but I told Dan that's fine with me if he doesn't. Jeff Beeler, is there a list of war games published in 2022? And the simple fact is, no, there isn't. There's not an accurate list of games published in 2022. As we found out, relying on Board Game Geek, and we've talked about this already, relying on Board Game Geek for publication dates, particularly over the last few years when we've seen a lot of logistics type delays, is you're going to have problems. So because these games can only be eligible for 1 year, right? So we want to make sure that we're catching them in the year of their eligibility. So we're kind of taking that out of the hands of not sure how I want to put this. We're creating a decision-making process to determine that a game is eligible. And even if we get it wrong, and let's say, so in 2023, we'll be giving out Charles S. Roberts Awards for 2022. Let's say there's a game released by hypothetically Thin Red Line Games that shipped on January 2nd, because that's probably happening. Thanks, Fabrizio. And let's say we put it in for 2022, and technically that's not correct. At least we'll be able to say, okay, well, it's technically not correct, but it's its year of eligibility, and it's not eligible for the following year. So,
yeah, Beat Cafe. No, I'm not on the board. Nothing.
Dan is not. So yeah, so that we clarify this, Dan is not on the board. I'll be upfront and say there's probably going to be some kind of media committee formed, with Dan probably is going to be on. But Dan has no influence whatsoever over the voting process or the voting data or any of that. The only thing that he has is maybe he gets the information more faster than the public does. That's really it. So from that standpoint, I personally, I guess you could talk to everybody on the board and see what they think. But I personally don't really have a problem if you don't recuse yourself. I mean, the players' aid's going to win anyway, so this way you give yourself the plausible deniability of saying, well, I'm sure I would have won had I not recused myself. So it's John C. from the sunny Philippines. Hey. How's it going? I hope you're doing well over there. We're doing terrible here in North America.
Johnny!
We'll be able to Dan Kilroy, who I'll point out is on the board, says Dan has absolutely no influence, which is what I said. Thank you for confirming that.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know if he means that in the context that we're thinking about it. Anyways,
actually, this isn't how I would have put it though, because without giving too much away, Dan's been like a really motivated booster of the Charles S. Roberts Awards, right? And that has a lot of value for the Charles S. Roberts Awards.
Well, I mean, I wanted that. I wanted to see that back again. I mean,
Yes, exactly. So regardless of the motivation, though, I wouldn't say Dan has had no influence, but Dan has no decision-making authority really anywhere. So,
and I don't want any.
In the insertion of the Noble Knight ad into the awards show. I think Noble Knight should be paying extra for that personally, but that's a discussion between you and Noble Knight. John Longshore says that Total War will be out in 2023. I have $5 on that. Mo agrees that BGG is not a reliable source of dates. John Stanley demands how the weather is in the Philippines, which I believe is important. Did someone put up a CSR game winning thread at BGG or Console World? Yes, I know that because I did. So hold on a second. I'll put a link to that in there too. Console World, no, but BGG, yes. And I honestly, to be completely honest, I forgot about Console World. So there isn't a better reason than that. I got to fix that. Yeah. So the post, I also changed the URL of the link to the winners page, and that has caused some confusion too. So that's really my fault. But next year we'll have all that lined up in advance, so it's just push a button and all the stuff goes out. So yes, exactly. Total War will be out in 23, 23, if then. So there you go. There you go. I agree. I think that's a great idea. We're gonna get them on that.
No.
So I got it before. We've got like 3 more minutes here. I would talk for 2 minutes, Dan. I gotta go get some.
You want me to talk for 2 minutes?
Talk for 2 minutes.
All right. No, I don't want to be a steward in any union, for God's sakes, man. Unions were, you know what? Unions, when they started, in my opinion, were needed. Now?
All right, shut up now.
All right.
So I had a problem with an order at Noble Knight, and they had to ship me a replacement for something. And I got the box. They shipped it via FedEx, and this isn't Noble Knight's fault. FedEx sucks. And it took several extra days and was at one point scheduled to be delivered on Christmas. And I'm like, whatever, man. So I get the box today, and hand drawn on the box.
Are you serious?
I'm like, holy cow. Holy cow. I don't even want to ship their original item back in this box. I think I need to keep this and hang it up on the wall.
Jesus Christ.
So talk about your personal customer service touch.
Seriously?
Nobody else is doing that. So media and customer success. That is an awesome piece of jargoneering that Andrew Atkin has done right there. Fantastic. Yeah, Noble Knight. Elon Musk has a bid to buy Noble Knight. Copies of Campaign for North Africa will be on sale for $11 a month. So it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
Ah, for God's sakes.
So we're not talking about that guy today. There's enough. Go somewhere else if you want to talk about him. Seriously, there's plenty of places, right? So Dan, if there was one thing that you wanted to see, and everybody in the chat can chime in on this too for the next minute or two, that you wanted to see done differently for next year, what would it be?
The CSRs?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, done differently. At what level?
Anywhere.
I don't know. I'd have input from more designers. You know, you had something. You had an idea about doing it live. I mean, that's logistically a nightmare, but if it can happen, that would be something beautiful, man.
It would be cool if we could do it. Right, we'd have to do it from the Bahamas or something like that.
Yeah.
But
let's do it. Let's go to Stupid Joe's place. Go to Puerto Rico.
Well, what we will really do is have the Bahamas on the green screen behind us, actually. William Aarons, thank you very much.
If we could do it live like a talk show, that would be fantastic.
I don't know that we're going to get there next year, but I think that is a thing that I'd like to explore that idea. I'm not saying I'm in favor of it. I'd want to think through all the ramifications and have those discussions, but I think it's plausible. William Aarons, thank you very much. I've had a number of people talk about how great it was to see Joanne talking about her father in that presentation. I think that meant a lot to a lot of people.
It did, man.
And Joanne was very nervous, and I told her, no, you did great. You did great. I don't, I'm not nervous because I have no shame, and I've been doing this every week for years. So, Um, I didn't feel like she came off as especially nervous, but she said
No,
she
no,
was.
no. She came. You know what? It was actually very charming.
So we're gonna get George R. R. Martin to finish the rules for Total War is what we're gonna do. This doesn't actually make any sense in the wargaming environment. This is an interesting idea, but this works for Hollywood because there was already a pre-existing Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences. We don't have that. So in like the science fiction world, you do have the Science Fiction Writers Association, I think it's called now. They did just change the name of it from Science Fiction Writers of America, even though they've had people from all over the world from the beginning. So,
hey, Poindexter Games, that guy, watch his channel.
John Stanley says split gunpowder into early gunpowder and late gunpowder. But we did. I mean, that's what we have: an early gunpowder and a late gunpowder.
Hey, Artie, we can do it. You got a big place. We can do the awards at your place.
Sure, we could do it from my spacious love dungeon here in the basement.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, but this organization currently has nothing to do with war games whatsoever. And I'm not sure what they have to do with anything, to be honest. Doug, you would actually know better than I do if that organization actually accomplishes anything. But my assumption is that they do not. All right. Well, don't worry. We're going to screw things up next year. All right. So, the show, we're out of time. I'd like to thank everybody for stopping by. We are, whether it happened tonight or not, we do want people to talk about the awards and give us feedback and say what they want to say about it. Right. So whether that's complaining about some particular nominee or some kind of procedural change or whatever, I think that's great. I think the dialogue itself is healthy.
Was it too short?
I have had zero feedback that the awards show was too short.
Yeah.
So,
and thanks for the heartfelt, people. Thank you.
Yes, and the encouragement feels low. Let me mention before we go, I will mention that Beandering Mike has another game giveaway because he gives away a game at least twice a day. So go check his channel out on that.
Where does he get all these games?
He's got a lot of games. Well, he's doing it intelligently. He's pacing it out right. All right, folks, we're out of time. Everybody have a great night. We'll be back next week on Dan's channel.
Big move. Big win. The Moses lose. Big moves. Big win. The Moses lose.